sorry. Don't get fatigued. No, no, I'm so glad for you. You always.
George, I'd like to buy that style. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Very good. How about you?
Hi. You know, I hadn't thought of Walter Chiswick in a long time. I'm really glad you mentioned it today.
Yeah.
Makes me want to go back and read the book.
Yeah, it was a comfort to me to read what he went through and
Oh.
how easy our life is.
Maybe the Jesuits aren't interested in his cause, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
You know, I was thinking.
That? Put a few of them. This whole body, I don't think so. There are other
just
steel
wondering.
girders.
Right, let's go in. Brothers, let's take our seats. We have for next item on our agenda is a proposal to transfer the Diocese of Fairbanks from the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples to the Congregation for Bishops. As some of you may know, the Diocese of Fairbanks is the only circumscription within the United States that remains under the jurisdiction of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. The rest of us came to the Congregation for Bishops in 1908. As a first step in the process, we were asked by the nuncio to consider a proposal to transfer the diocese to the Congregation for Bishops. I invite Archbishop Etchen of Anchorage and Bishop Zielinski of Fairbanks to present the background on this item. Here they come. Oh. Zooming in from Alaska. You know, at one time, being under propaganda was kind of interesting, what you could do, at least when I worked in that congregation. I don't think it has the slick it has at one time. Okay, in any case.
Thank you, Your Eminence. My brothers, the documentation for this motion, I presume we are calling it, is in the blue-colored sheet, and it is there in all of the other information. The formal, let me get to the top of my remarks here first. This documentation contains the correspondence thus far between Cardinal Filoni as the prefect for the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples and Cardinal DiNardo as the president of the USCCB. And it explores the components of concern in this request. Also included is a letter from myself to Cardinal DiNardo addressing his two primary concerns regarding the provision of priests and financial support for the diocese. Also in my letter, I asked Cardinal DiNardo to initiate a formal request to transfer the Diocese of Fairbanks from the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples to the Congregation for Bishops. The formal introduction of this request requires Cardinal DiNardo, as president of our Episcopal Conference, to write a letter to Cardinal Filoni requesting the transfer, in which he must indicate the support or consent of you, the body of bishops. Thus, today, we are here to consult to see if there is such consent for the motion. This motion is simply an effort to acknowledge what is already a reality. Namely, the Diocese of Fairbanks receives its primary financial support from the Church in the United States. Many of you, brother bishops, have generously welcomed Bishop Zielinski into your dioceses to make mission appeals, and we're grateful for that support. Regarding the provision of priests, the Diocese of Fairbanks, as well as Anchorage and Juneau, like many of the dioceses in the lower 48, now has international priests, as we all do. And as we know, we do not need the endorsement of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples to have priests from other countries serving in our dioceses. This proposal, I'm glad to share, does have the support of the bishops of Alaska, as well as Archbishop Emeritus Roger Schweitz and Bishop Don Kettler, the former Bishop of Fairbanks. So at this time, I'd simply ask Bishop Zielinski to address this matter from his perspective.
Cardinals, bishops, brothers and sisters in Christ, thank you for your time. I was ordained a bishop in December 2014. In September of 2015, I was invited to participate in the new bishops course in Rome for the Congregation of Bishops, because all of the dioceses in the U.S. are under this congregation except Fairbanks. In September of 2016, a year later, Holy Mother Church decided I needed to grow in grace and wisdom, so I was asked to attend the new bishops course for the evangelization of the peoples. Cardinal Filoni gave an opening address by indicating that various dicasteries in Rome were going through a change, that each dicastery was asked to do an internal analysis evaluation of sorts. He indicated that the Congregation for the Propagation of Faith was established in 1622. It had served its original purpose for why it was established. In the process of looking forward, he indicated that current situation for evangelization in the world has changed. Places that had never received the gospel now have received them, and the focus is now on new evangelization. This translates into a practical change of various dioceses who have come under the evangelization of the peoples to be moved to the Congregation of Bishops. During my 2-week time of this course, the vast majority of bishops approached me and said, "Chad, why are you here when you are part of the United States?" They said many had received significant funding from various dioceses in the U.S. Also, I discovered in our conversations throughout the 2-week course that many of these dioceses from India, Africa, and Oceania were financially destitute, far less poor than we were. I met privately with Cardinal Filoni, and he asked me to look at what had just happened in Canada a few months before. That would be June, July of 2016, where 6 Northern Tier dioceses were moved to the Congregation of Bishops. So I contacted Bishop Crosby, currently the Diocese of Hamilton, Ontario, who at the time was a president of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops, and he shared 3 simple points of how that was accomplished. He said the Canadian Conference wanted to take seriously their call to be missionary disciples, and they saw that that could happen within their own country. Secondly, they vowed to commit financial resources that were needed in these remote mission dioceses, primarily of indigenous peoples. Thirdly, they vowed to encourage and provide priests and religious to serve in these regions. The current situation of the Diocese of Fairbanks is that 92% of our operating budget comes from the lower 48. For this, I am profoundly grateful to all of you for allowing us to send our Alaskan Shepherd, a 45-year-old paper that tells the story of our mission work in northern Alaska. Also, many of you have been extremely generous in allowing myself or one of our priests to go to your parishes for mission appeals. The generosity of the good people of God outside of Alaska is what makes it possible for us to continue our mission work. Some dioceses have allowed priests to come to Fairbanks to serve for 2 to 6 months, 3 years, or longer. This is a huge help. Thank you. Most of our recent mission priests have come from outside the U.S., as Archbishop Aitchen has indicated. Today we have a total of 20 priests, 46 parishes, a territory of 410,000 square miles, 2 times the size of Texas approximately. 80% of these parishes are in remote villages and are far below the poverty level. Therefore, over 50% of our budget is for transportation of priests and religious to meet the sacramental and catechetical needs of the faithful. In the past 3 years, the evangelization of the peoples has asked us to reduce the amount of money that we receive from them and has asked us to seriously consider not accepting any funding at all. So we're down to about just over $15,000 a year, which is a very small part of a $5.3 million annual budget. I believe God is providing, and many of you are most generous in your support, so I ask that you support our petition to move from the evangelization of the peoples to the Congregation for Bishops. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bishop.
Finally, brothers, I think the one other salient point that you would want to know is that while this transfer, should it occur, makes no formal demand of the USCCB as a conference to take on any formal responsibility for the Diocese of Fairbanks, either in providing priests or financial support beyond what is available through Catholic Home Missions, we do wish to make clear the need of the diocese, in fact all 3 dioceses in Alaska, for your support, and to please keep us in mind if you have a priest that's looking for a change of scenery, an opportunity to serve in another part of the country, we'd be glad to put him to work. So thank you, Your Eminence.
Someone has their hand up? Archbishop Sheehan has his hand up. Okay. Please, Archbishop Sheehan.
Bishop, just wondering, how many, you gave some of the statistics about about Fairbanks, but how many Catholics are there in the Diocese of Fairbanks?
There's roughly about 11,000.
11,000.
A total population of about 167,000 people.
So maybe about 10% or so. 11,000. Thank you.
So, who does the proposal? I do. I would say move the motion, Archbishop.
I'd be happy to do that. Do the members support the proposal to transfer the Diocese of Fairbanks from the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples to the Congregation for Bishops?
Do we have a second for that? Second, good. This is a voice vote. By the way, any further discussion before we move to the voice vote? By the way, I would add, we also consulted a number of regions in the United States on this, so this has been going through quite a long process. All of those in favor of this proposal, please indicate by saying aye. No, those who are opposed, and no abstentions on this, I don't think. The motion passes.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, brothers.
Thank you.
Now you can write your letter.
Yes, now we can write the letters on it. That's good. Okay, now we have a few moments. We want to invite Archbishop Kurtz to the podium. We want to recognize the 40th anniversary of the pastoral statement on persons with disabilities. And this National Catholic Partnership for Disabilities, and Archbishop Kurtz has been gracious enough. I was on it for years and years, and when I became president, I left, and Archbishop Kurtz has been invited and has worked very well on it. So Archbishop Kurtz, it's all yours.
Well, Cardinal DiNardo, thank you. And thank you, by the way, for the wonderful service you gave as Episcopal moderator for a number of years. Brothers, this is a brief report, and I hope I can do it right here from the floor. Think back for a moment of what was the meeting of the bishops exactly 40 years ago. In 1978, there was a pastoral letter given, and this pastoral letter was on the topic of persons with disabilities and their capacity to be engaged in the full life of the church. Well, now 40 years has gone by, and many of you can look at your own local churches and see the tremendous way in which the gifts of persons with disabilities has enriched not only their own lives, but the lives of so many other people. So I wanted to simply stand to recognize this moment in 40 years of the accomplishments that have been done by the local church. What you have at your place is a statement, really a resolution, by the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. This resolution is coming from a group that actually was formed following that pastoral letter. And with all the many efforts that have been done to promote the welcoming, the engagement, and the involvement of persons with disabilities within our church and within our society, their work has been mighty. I present to you this pastoral letter. It is, as it says on, pastoral resolution. It's both an affirmation of what has happened, and it's a commitment that we're making as a board and asking that perhaps you as bishops might take back to your diocese in the hope that you yourself would do the same. Last year at this time, our body of bishops approved a revised guideline for sacramental preparation and reception of the sacraments by persons with disabilities. And that is something that already is having great effects within your local church. So I want to thank you for your willingness to be part, again, of this partnership that is now 40 years old. In your name, I also want to say a special word of thanks to Jan Benton. Jan is the executive director of the National Catholic Partnership on Disabilities. She has actually been involved as a staff person from right after the pastoral letter itself was promulgated. And so she is in her final year of service, and I want to, in your name, publicly say thank you to her and to all who have been involved in this National Catholic Partnership on Disability. And Cardinal DiNardo, I want to thank you for the opportunity to hold this up in gratitude. Thank you.
Thanks, Archbishop. Thank you so much. We really want to thank Jan Benton and the whole group, the board there. They are little but mighty. I think you would agree with me, Archbishop Kurtz. They really and truly are. These incredible numbers of years with such resources and imaginative ways of including all the disabled, not just to be able to get into the church, but being active in ministries and all kinds of things, of knowing they are appreciated and valued. So thank you very much, Archbishop Kurtz. I would now call Archbishop Chaput and Bishop Frank Caggiano, Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth, to the front. They're going to give a report, although I think basically Bishop Caggiano is giving the report, on the 15th Ordinary General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops on Young People, the Faith, and Vocational Discernment. I think there were a group of us who were members of the Synod, which Bishop Kajana will go through. I think he will do it in his own inimitable Brooklyn way, wherever that may lead us.
We survived. Thank you, Your Eminence.
That's about all.
Good afternoon, brothers. I wish to share with you some thoughts regarding the Synod on Young People, Faith, and Vocational Discernment that was held in Rome last month. In light of our continued efforts to root out the crime and sin of the sexual abuse of minors, our renewed commitment to seek better ways to serve our youth and young adults also remains for all of us of paramount importance. It was the heart of the work of the Synod. My remarks are divided really in three parts. First, to summarize the highlights of what happened, to outline some key themes that emerged from the Synod discussions, and to offer perhaps some suggestions on steps to move our efforts forward with a revitalized ministry for young adults. First, what happened at the Synod? As you know, there were nearly 350 people who attended the Synod. This included bishops, young adults, experts, representatives from religious communities, and lay leaders. The United States was represented by 8 bishops. They were Cardinal DiNardo, Cardinal Cupich, Archbishop Gomez, Archbishop Chaput, Archbishop Skurla, Bishop Barron, Bishop Zaiden, and myself. We also sent 3 young adult auditors, 4 organizational representatives, and were supported by a team from the conference itself. We met from October 3rd to October 28th, and we examined the Instrumentum Laboris, which proposed a threefold methodology of seeing, judging, acting. We explored the current reality of young people, reflected upon their vocational journey, and considered action for the future. We heard and offered interventions on key themes in plenary sessions and in small group discussions. And at the end of our time with our Holy Father, a final document was approved that outlined a variety of key themes to guide our future ministry for youth and young adults. So, what were the themes that arose? From my own reflection, there are at least 7 themes or principles that were raised at the Synod that will require our work to explore further in the months and years ahead. First, there is the ongoing need to protect the vulnerable. This is certainly our commitment here, and the Synod acknowledged and affirmed this as a priority for the whole Church. We must protect our young people and ensure that our ministry for and with them are models of positive experience of encounter between church leaders and the young. Secondly, there was a deep appreciation of the global nature of our church, with different challenges and priorities faced by young people in different regions and continents. In light of this diversity, the final Synod document calls us to explore the notion of synodality at every level of church life, and to embrace a posture of ecclesial listening and docility before the promptings of the Holy Spirit in our midst. Third, the Synod reminded us that many young people are facing violence, poverty, and suffering and live on the periphery of society. While some are active in their faith, Many more are disaffiliating in growing numbers. So our ministry must seek these young people who are facing such challenges as a priority, but also to raise our voices in the public square on their behalf. Fourth, there was a clear call to bring forth new young leaders. The Synod was energized by the young people present in the Synod Hall. They reminded us that they seek to make a difference in the life of the church. They wish to be protagonists in ministry, and they made it clear that they do not seek to be simply given token involvement. They deeply desire to exercise genuine leadership in our church. Fifth, we're being called, brothers, to identify and form mentors for young people. For young people repeatedly told us they seek accompaniment. We must help to identify mentors for them, to accompany them in their journey, to form intergenerational spiritual families and provide them with comprehensive spiritual, intellectual, pastoral, and human formation. Sixth, the Synod also expanded our understanding of vocation. For the Synod reaffirmed the baptismal call to holiness as the foundation for all discipleship, and affirmed concrete ways in which each young person can live that call, whether by embracing a permanent state of life, such as marriage, ordination, and consecrated life, or through the intentional choices that young people make to live their call to holiness in the single life. The broadening of the understanding of vocation must continue to be explored in the years ahead. And finally, and perhaps most obviously, the entire church has been asked to renew our ministry to youth and young adults on every level of our ecclesial life. So, what are the next steps? While we await the Holy Father's response, his apostolic exhortation, brothers, we are being invited by the Synod to prepare how best to respond to its recommendations. So allow me to share with you some possible initial steps that you and I may wish to pursue in our own diocese. First, the anticipated apostolic exhortation and the Synod document are addressed to the global church community. You and I, each of us, must prepare to implement its recommendations in our own unique diocese. This may require that we find ways to engage our own young people, perhaps in special assemblies, perhaps in a unique diocesan synod, however you may choose, to seek how to continue the synod's work. Also, the National Dialogue on Catholic Pastoral Ministry with Youth and Young Adults and the follow-up to the 5th Encuentro are wonderful models of engagement that can help you and me discern how best to move forward in our own diocese. We can begin also our efforts to form mentors and ministry leaders on every level of church life. We can now begin to plan how best to share best practices to help create effective accompaniment of young people in their lives of faith. You and I can begin to strengthen our outreach and pastoral care for all young people, especially young adults, and those involved in the Pastoral Juvenil Hispana. These ministries can build bridges across diverse experiences of youth and young adults. And finally, we can consider ways in which, at the national level here at the USCCB, we might also find new ways to increase youth and young adult engagement in our work, in our committees, and our staffing structures. Allow me to conclude by offering a personal reflection. It seems to me, my brothers, that the Synod came at a time when we needed it most, to explore new, healthy, and appropriate ways to engage youth and young adults. It was a moment of great grace that demands our continued time and attention to implement. Our Holy Father has encouraged us to act with boldness and courage. Let us reflect how we will invest, care for, and engage our youth and young adults and those who walk with them. Now, more than ever, we need to stand with our young people in solidarity and hope. And so I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to receive whatever comments or questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bishop Caggiano, for you and perhaps for all the others who are sitting up here in front. If you have questions or comments for those at the Synod, please do so now. I was at the Synod. The one thing I will say is the general sense sometimes of sitting listening to a lot of talks did not necessarily improve, but what was improved was the young people. It was great to see the young people there. It's the first time we ever had talks given and they applauded or didn't applaud at the talk, whatever it was giving. So fascinating group of young people. The English language and other groups of languages was, they were stimulating and interesting. I think, Bishop, you would say the same on that.
No, absolutely. They were very demonstrative, I must confess.
So anyone here who has a... Bishop Rosazza. Somebody's over here, this side, back there. Someone just put up a card there.
Bishop Frank, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. What would you estimate the average age of the young adults? I presume they're not youth, they're young adults at the Synod.
Yeah, I would think it's roughly between 22 and 25 would have been the average age, some a bit older.
There were a few older. There was two people I know of that were 32 years old, so that's it.
Yeah. And one of our auditors was in his early 30s, so it ran the gamut of young adults.
Archbishop Vigneron.
Thanks, Bishop Caggiano. You made mention in your presentation about the whole range of experiences across the globe for young people in the church. Could you offer some contrasts and comparisons, especially, well, just what struck you as the same all over, and really maybe in that foiling, what's very particular for us to pay attention to here? I would appreciate that.
One of the things that struck me was the desire to have spiritual mentorship. There was the theme of spiritual fatherhood and motherhood that came up over and over again from all the young adults who were there. What was wildly diverse were the challenges they faced. I recall one of the bishops, I believe he was from India, spoke of the story of the martyrdom of a young man who was basically asked to renounce his Catholic faith and refused and was stoned to death. And this happened not long ago. In fact, the Holy Father mentioned it at his audience remarks the next day. So we have challenges here, but there are challenges that go to the very heart of survival for many young adults in different parts of the world. But their spiritual desire for mentorship, their desire to be listened to, and the challenge back to listen to the voices of those who love them in the tradition seem to be consistent. But anyone else have any thoughts? I guess not.
Do we have someone else? I was also amazed at their desire for intense prayer life.
Right.
Devotional life, even beyond the liturgy. It was very impressive, I must say, incredibly impressive.
Anything else about the experience of the young people? What was common among them?
In some countries, you could see like 90% going to church. I remember one country said 90% we go to church. Some others, they say, whatever we say in the group, please don't share it with others outside in my own country, because I could be in trouble. You know, in some countries you see persecution, some countries will see pressure, and some countries there is lots of freedom. Those are common, you see it among the different people and young people.
We want to thank Archbishop Chaput before he gives talk that he's been on the Permanent Council for all these years, and thank you, Archbishop, for doing all that work on the Permanent Council of the Synod.
Well, thank you.
We have
Thank you.
and Cardinal Tobin was just elected to that Permanent Council.
Right. In the past, the members of the Permanent Council for the Synod were elected by the whole body of bishops at the Synod, but we have a new system now where instead of 3 being elected from the Americas, meaning North, Central, and South America, 2 were elected from Canada and the United States, and 3 were elected from Latin America. The 2 elected from the United States were Cardinal Tobin, who represents, of course, the United States in a special way, but all of the North Americans, and Cardinal Cyprien Lacroix from the Archdiocese of Quebec is the other. The thing that I'd like to mention, because I'm sure it's on our mind, is the relationship of the Synod to the sexual abuse of young people. There was little appetite among the majority of people to spend much time talking about it, so there's not much in the document about that. I think there's 3 paragraphs. People in some parts of the world say it's not an issue for them. Other places, they don't seem to really want to talk about it in a very public kind of way. But many of us who went in from the North America and Australia and other places in perhaps Northern Europe were very anxious to talk about it, but we got a hearing, but we didn't get much substance about that in the document itself. The most impressive thing to me at these synods is the fact that the Holy Father comes to everything. You know, those of us who are privileged to represent you, spent a month with the Holy Father, almost every day. And he paid attention to what everyone said. It's amazing to me that he has that patience. Sometimes he does 2 of these a year. So he's really, he works very hard at listening to the bishops of the world on the issues that come before him. So that's, my impression of the Synod. I'm grateful for having the opportunity, both 3 years ago and this year, to be your representative in some sense at the Synod. So thank you very much for that privilege.
And if I'm just to add, the Holy Father was not only present, but he made it his custom to arrive about 20 minutes early and stood at the front door. And anyone who came in, he greeted, spent time with, chatted. And for the young people who were there, it was just an exhilarating experience to be able to be that close to the successor of Peter and to share that life, right? It's tremendous.
Anything else? Okay. That's all. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you.
Now I would like Archbishop Gustavo Garcia Silla and Bishop Nelson Perez from the Committee on Cultural Diversity in the Church to do a report on the 5th Encuentro, which was a very important event over the last couple of years and had its culmination up in North Texas in September. So, Gustavo, you're it.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Brothers, on behalf of the Committee of Cultural Diversity in the Church, we want to thank you for your generous participation in the 5th National Encuentro of Hispanic Latino Ministries celebrated on September 20th to the 23rd in Grapevine, Texas. We also thank the bishops that were not able to attend but sent delegates to represent their dioceses at this historic ecclesial event. What we lived at the National Encuentro was a true manifestation of God's love for his people. I am happy to share with you some highlights of the 5th National Encuentro, that they are meaningful for all of us and above all the people that we served. This historic ecclesial event gathered nearly 3,500 participants from practically every diocese in the United States, including 124 bishops and over 200 Catholic national organizations. The National Encuentro experience was described and process was described by many as a moment of grace, a balm for the wounded, a beacon of light during dark times. Pope Francis referred to the Quinto Encuentro process as an instrument of grace that led personal and pastoral conversion and called for continued pastoral accompaniment of the faithful in the local churches. All the main stage events, including liturgies, prayer services, and presentations, were transmitted live in English and Spanish. In social media, there was a very positive interaction, as you can see by the numbers projected in the screen. We have been able to track over 140 written articles covering the event and its outcomes. Participants rated different aspects of the Quinto Encuentro with very high marks. The liturgies are the keynote presentations. The regional process sessions and the ministerial areas overwhelmingly received the highest marks. Also, 93% of respondents also said that the Quinto Encuentro process has strengthened their ability to be missionary disciples. Now, we ask for your continued support as we come down the mountain from the national event with a vision generated by the consultation process. And as we bring the conclusions and recommendations of the Quinto Encuentro home to our regions, dioceses, parishes, and other Catholic organizations and institutions, may you be enablers so that this beacon of light will continue radiating all people in our diocese throughout the United States. As you continue to accompany and guide your flock, we pray that the delegates to the National Encuentro, as well as those participating in the local Encuentro process, will continue to share their love for Christ with many others as joyful missionaries of Jesus Christ and his disciples. May they walk closely with you as you strive to build a culture of encounter in your local churches. At this time, I ask Bishop Nelson Perez to share with you some of the preliminary priorities and recommendations emerging from the consultation process, as well as the next steps on the Quinto Encuentro process to take place over the next 2 years.
Dear brother bishops, on behalf of the Subcommittee for Hispanic Affairs, I also want to express our profound gratitude for your support of the Fifth Encuentro process in your diocese and in regions, as well as the USCCB staff. Over 90 staff members of the USCCD traveled to Texas to support this wonderful weekend. The great success of the Fifth National Encuentro was a direct result of the missionary and consultation efforts that took place in most of our dioceses over the past 2 years. The consultation process involved over 330,000 leaders at the local level, and it was in Texas that we reached a high point of grace and blessing during the Fifth National Encuentro. The preliminary findings of the Fifth Encuentro consultation process call for a more welcoming and missionary church that seeks ecclesial integration, not cultural assimilation, and that invests in leadership development and formations of Hispanic leaders who are willing and ready to engage as interculturally competent ministers. The process also identified recommendations that need urgent pastoral response: leadership development and formation of emerging leaders, particularly young adults, more effective accompaniment for families, identification and promotion of best practices at the diocesan and parish level in Catholic schools and seminaries, renewed advocacy and solidarity efforts with immigrant families suffering discrimination, persecution, and separation. Promote a model of Catholic minister that is interculturally competent as a missionary disciple. Generate creative ways to promote family catechesis with a strong biblical component. Overall, three major initiatives in national scope have been identified so far. A leadership development initiative for Hispanic young adults and those working with youth and young adults. A parish-based leadership and human development models and materials for family, with a strong biblical and evangelizing catechetical component that connects linguistically and culturally to the experience of the Hispanic Latino community. Pastoral guidelines and best practices for parish and diocesan ministry among Hispanics. Over the next 2 years, we will be taking 3 steps as a follow-up to the 5th National Encuentro. First, the proceedings, conclusions, and recommendations of the 5th National Encuentro will be produced and distributed to all dioceses and participating Catholic organizations. Second, the 5th Encuentro in-services on the proceedings will take place in all Episcopal regions across the country. And thirdly, 5th Encuentro in-services will take place in dioceses so that they can use the insights, recommendations, and other relevant information for their own pastoral planning purposes. Also, many dioceses have contacted the conference asking for guidance and resources to continue the work of missionary activity and reflection in their parishes and ecclesial movements. I am happy to report that at your request, the subcommittee is adapting the sessions of the 5th Encuentro so they can be used by any parish or diocese or group. This resource should be available online in early 2019 under the theme, Creating a Culture of Encounter. Also, our Sunday Visitor has developed a resource to be used as a follow-up to the 5th Encuentro sessions, which is already available. You can find out more about this resource and other resources in the 5th Encuentro website. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your update, Bishop Perez. And now we invite you, your questions or your comments about the Quinto Encuentro.
Before we do that, Bishop Olson is to be congratulated. His diocese hosted the whole thing in September, so thanks, Bishop Olson. That's it. Any questions, comments, observations? Bishop Ricken. Bishop Soto. Followed by Bishop Soto.
Archbishop Sealer, I was wondering, was there a lot of dialogue between the results of the convocation held in Florida, which was also on missionary discipleship and evangelization, and the great program that the Quinto Encuentro has produced, so that we as a Catholic Church are moving together and finding possible ways to integrate all of our efforts in the same direction. Could you share that a little bit with us?
Yes, at the level of the conference, people from the staff, from different offices, they were involved in the convocation, and then also about 90 of the members of our staff, they were involved in the Quinto Encuentro. So it was connection in many different ways. But the process, I mean, the activities were a little bit different. One was more targeted as an event to generate future opportunities. In the case of the Quinto Encuentro, was already even before. And so they overlap at one point, and now the Quinto Encuentro continues. But we need to remember that many of the young adults who participated are, even though they are bilingual, they prefer English. They are born in the United States, many of them. So there is through them, in the two cultures, is one way to see the communion. But of course, as the USCCB, we are working with the whole spectrum. Yeah. And that's why we have been exchanging Fifth Encuentro, Quinto Encuentro, in English and Spanish, so that everyone will feel welcome in all the structures, all the steps.
Bishop Soto?
Just want to thank the committee and everyone who worked, and the USCCB staff who worked so hard to pull off just a great event, and the persistence of carrying through with the whole process that started in parish gatherings and diocesan and regional, and then culminated in that national gathering. And I thought it presented a way of consultation and process that hopefully could be incorporated in other aspects of the conference's work. I do also want to compliment the liturgies during the Encuentro. I thought they were just very vibrant and alive, and models of what liturgy can be and should be in our parishes in whatever language that might be. I would hope that as we move forward, and it was great to see the timeline for moving the Encuentro out. But I think to demonstrate our own commitment as bishops to what comes out of this Encuentro, I'm hoping that the thinking and the hopes of the Encuentro can be incorporated into the strategic plan of the USCCB, and again, there's some very good thinking there, and I'm hoping that will find its way into how we chart out our course of strategic priorities for the conference. Lastly, I just would. If I have one criticism about the Quinto Encuentro, is that we spoke a lot about family and how important family is, and one could see that in the way people express themselves, but we never acknowledged the problem, particularly with younger Latinos, that nobody's getting married. And that is an epidemic reality in our community today, that no one is getting married, or very few are getting married. And some of that has to do with obviously social and cultural changes. Some of that has to do with economic disparities. But it's a really serious problem that unfortunately didn't get articulated in the Quinto Encuentro. But again, my congratulations for a job well done.
Thank you, Bishop.
Bishop Rosazza, followed by Bishop Elizondo.
Thank you, Archbishop, for all the hard work you and your committee did to organize the Encuentro. And it was an extraordinary experience. And I would wager that there were people from all over the Latin-speaking world, Hispanic world. So there was cultural diversity there. And then also, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the affirmation that they gave the bishops was just wonderful at a time when we're being beaten up all over the place. So it was wonderful to experience that.
Mm-hmm. Just a comment about that. There were bishops that they made comments to me that because of barrier language or cultural difficulties or challenges, that was a space for them to relate pastors with their flock and the flock with them. The relationship, and it's like has happened in families. Sometimes the communication has not been there, so this was an opportunity to reconnect or connect even in deeper ways through spirituality, expression of themselves.
Bishop Elizondo.
Yes, at Pearl Harbor attack, a Japanese almirant said that he was afraid he was awakening the sleeping giant. I would rephrase that and say that, praise the Lord, we are awakening a sleeping giant among the Hispanic community. What a blessing it is, and the Quinto Encuentro process show that. I am nothing but giving kudos to all the team that have worked so hard for such a long time, from the Conference of Bishops, of course you and Bishop Nelson. And I would say that with Bishop Nelson, now that he mentioned that he will offer, or the team is offering the 5 sessions of the process of the Encuentro, also in an adapted mode so that everyone can benefit from that, that will be fantastic, absolutely. Because as you were mentioning also, for the Hispanics nowadays and for all of us, it's very important that we do not think in any other ethnicity here present as just a matter of assimilation no more, but integration, and that's a wonderful asset and a wonderful blessing, and the wonderful tapestry that is the Church of God here in the United States. And also, I would like to emphasize that, of course, certainly, I don't know in some of the areas of the country, but in Seattle, even though we are experiencing, like anybody else, the lack of sacramental marriages in the church, of course, but however, those numbers that we have are coming from the Hispanic communities to get married in the church. And if they don't do more, it's because of the lack of status, legal status, of course, that many are facing here, and that's still a threat, that we keep on working for the immigration issues here to be reformed and sadly to say it, but even our president is still pushing for taking away the birthright and stuff like that. And so people are still very much afraid. But again, I'm praising the Lord for the wonderful support of so many bishops, as we just saw the numbers throughout the whole United States. And many of those places didn't even, before that, they didn't even realize that they have so much presence of the Hispanic, and it was wonderful for the young people, the young generations that showed up there at the Quinto Encuentro, that they saw their bishops there supporting finally and fully awake over their presence. And so that was a wonderful blessing. And of course, I would say that our people, and you saw some pictures there, are very supportive of the bishops, not because they are naive or they want to deny the scandals or anything, but because they are people of faith, very strong faith, and they go beyond the scandals, and they just keep on persevering because they have suffered a lot already through their whole history and of Christianity, especially in Latin America. But that helps them to be strong enough to keep on persevering, and that's also a wonderful gift to the church in the United States. For me, I would say, like someone that said in the Archdiocese of Seattle, it was like a new Pentecost, and it was a wonderful blessing. I'm not too emotional, generally speaking. I'm very passionate, but not emotional. In spite of that, I was moved to tears so many times during the Encuentro. So I have nothing but congratulations to everyone, kudos, and thank you all brothers in the Episcopacy here for the great support for this wonderful event.
Bishop Deely.
One doesn't look usually to Maine, to the northern hinterlands for Hispanic community, but we do have a small Hispanic community. And I'm very grateful for the fifth Encuentro for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was the first time that our people in Maine participated in it, and it made a huge impact on them. They felt that it made them part of the church. They felt like they were part of a process. And I just want to thank you for the process that you laid out. We only had 5 people go to Fort Worth, but the process involved a whole load of people ahead of time and continues to do that. It was really a wonderful thing to incorporate people into the community of the church, so I'm grateful.
Thank you, Bishop.
Bishop Stowe, followed by Cardinal Tobin. Right now is the last. Bishop Stowe?
Bishop Elizondo already alluded to this, but At this moment of great suffering for the Hispanic Church in the United States, and where many of our Hispanic brothers and sisters are feeling under persecution, what an incredible sign it was to see that beautiful gathering and how affirming it was for that community. I heard it over and over again, the number of bishops who were there to stand with them. It was a prophetic sign to be together and to recognize the contribution that that community has made to the church in the United States at a time when they're feeling so underappreciated and undervalued. We have to recognize that a number of people participated in the Encuentro, the Quinto Encuentro, through the internet because they weren't able to travel. The distance made it very difficult for those who were undocumented to be able to be present. And finally, I really want to acknowledge the contributions of the young adults who made their own experience as dreamers or as DACA recipients very poignant, because their whole futures are put on hold as the country refuses to deal with their status, refuses to regularize their situation, refuses to allow them to continue to contribute their gifts in a safe and legal way. So it was very profound to have them make their contribution there. So I thank the committee and everybody who's been involved in that process.
Cardinal Tobin.
Thank you, Cardinal. I'd like to give witness to a miracle and then offer two brief pastoral reflections on the Encuentro. The miracle took place in February, last February in Newark. It was following our diocesan Encuentro, where people who had taken part in the process said, we know we can't go to the regional because there's a limit on the number of people. Could we celebrate the Eucharist together? And I said, sure, and we agreed on a Friday night in the cathedral. And that afternoon, there were very dire predictions of a storm that actually came with hurricane force winds, a nor'easter that was the first of 4 that hit Newark last winter. And I said to Bishop Cruz in the afternoon, what are we going to do? Can we call it off? And he said, no. He said, there's no way we can get to everybody, so we could have them in the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. I said, okay. More than 500 people came that night. And it was just what had been created among them by the Encuentro process. So the two brief pastoral reflections. First, I think this is an example of synodality at all levels of the church. Begins in the parish, it proceeds to the diocese, then to the region, and then the national, and it's going back that way too.
That's right.
And secondly, I think it underscores the priority that we ought to give to youth ministry, especially in this community. First, because the demographics show there are more young people here than anywhere else. But they're also going through a process of acculturation or something else. You know, some say the future is mestizo. Something new is being created. But if we don't give attention to it, then what's going to be created won't have room for the church, for the faith, and for the rich patrimony that is our people's. And so I'm talking to Mother Tobin's oldest boy. This means I got to walk the talk with youth ministry in the Archdiocese because of the great prospect and the possibility of missing the boat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bishop Flores, followed by Bishop Cisneros.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick points. One of the beauties of the Encuentro process is that some of the young people who could not participate in the national or even the regional event could participate at the local event if they were impeded by fear because of their undocumented status. One of the things that I certainly heard, and a lot of people heard during the Encuentro, was a concern for the immigrant poor who could not participate fully. And I think as we heard about the Synod's concern for the youth on the periphery, we have a responsibility to keep in mind the young people who can't participate easily in the processes and in the programs that we have in our dioceses for our young people. That we always have to ask ourselves the question, who's not here and why not? And to remind us that at our last meeting, it seems like a long time ago, we were very concerned, rightly so, of the separation of mothers and children, and there was even a delegation from the conference that came to my diocese, which Cardinal led, and for which I'm very grateful, because they saw these young people on the periphery who are in detention centers and who are in very difficult situations. And to remind us that this continues to be part of the mission of the Church. The young people and their mothers and fathers are still coming through the entire border from California to Brownsville. They're coming now. They're coming in caravans. And that we really see a great witness on the part of so many anonymous volunteers who in my diocese and every diocese along the border, who every night prepare meals and clothing and transportation for these mothers and children, which is a continuing phenomenon. And that we should keep this in mind. We have many grave matters to attend to, but the church that is formed by the Eucharistic sacrifice is never more herself when she hears and sees the people that nobody else wants to see. And these are our children also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bishop Cisneros, followed by Bishop Pfeiffer.
I just want to underscore what has been said here. I think I'm one of the oldest that have been since the first Encuentro. I've been in all of them. And, and I can truthfully say that this fifth Encuentro was not just an event, but it's a process, as has been said and is continued to be said. It did not stop in Grapevine, where we had a wonderful celebration. It continues. And I'm leading the region now, and I've heard that some of our dioceses have been asking, how can we follow up? Give us more information. The Diocese of Brooklyn, Monday, we're having all the delegates of the regional diocesan, we're gathering to reflect precisely on what you have presented to us today. So I want to thank you for the process. I want to thank you for all the work you have done. One of the highlights for me of the fifth Encuentro was when I was invited to be at a dinner with the young people. Nobody else was there except young people and the 100 and so bishops that were there. We sat down and there were some questions that they had. We put aside the question and we just talked. And the sense of the young people to be at the table, not just the dinner table, but the table of the church, of our ministry of evangelization was wonderful. At the end of that dinner, they all said a prayer for me and for all the bishops. I think that was indicative of the young people who want to be part of the church. Bishop Caggiano just expressed beautifully what happened at the Synod. I think that what we experience in the fifth Encuentro with the young people certainly is to be considered for the work that the USCCB and the bishops are doing for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bishop. Finally, Bishop Pfeiffer.
There was a beautiful woman present there who hasn't been mentioned, and I want to point out what her presence meant to the thousands that were there. That's the Morenita, La Virgen de Guadalupe. She hasn't been mentioned, but she's the modelo of Encuentro. What she did in Mexico, we're going to celebrate that apparition real soon, the Encuentro of the old and the new. She's the model of, after Christ, how we work to be an encuentro one with another. And she's not only our mother, we're all her children, and everyone there, I think, felt they were a daughter, a child, a son of Mary. She's also our model as the woman of faith, and she also has chosen us to be her Juan Diegos today. She didn't choose some big ambassador or king to bring her message to the bishop. She chose an indígena, and he was the messenger and pointed out, regardless of our position in life, no matter how poor we feel or humble, we are chosen by her to be her Juan Diegos today.
Thank you. Well, with this, just talking of what has happened and that you will witness in your own dioceses, we want just to end this presentation by expressing our gratitude to the wonderful USCCB staff. It was truly the presence already of the seats of what is called Pastoral de Conjunto. We saw that so vividly. That helped to make the 5th National Encuentro such a beautiful experience and tremendous success, a true moment of grace for the Church in the United States. The presence of the Holy Spirit has been working through our meeting, brothers, including very vividly our difficult situation that we are dealing with, but also is present in so many other ways, as was also in the Quinto Encuentro. Once again, thanks to Bishop Michael Olson, our gracious host, and to the Diocese of Dallas and Fort Worth and surrounding areas, which provided an army of joyful and dedicated volunteers for the National Encuentro. To all of you, brothers, our most sincere gratitude. Thank you.
Brothers, as some of you may know, Mrs. Linda Hunt, Associate General Secretary for the Administrative Offices and National Collections, is retiring at the end of this year after 22 years of dedicated service to the conference. Linda began her USCCB career as Associate Director in the Office of Human Resources and was promoted shortly thereafter to Office Director. She was again promoted and appointed Associate General Secretary in 2011. Linda's vibrant faith is evident in all that she does. She's greatly respected by the conference staff. She is always a compassionate voice at the table and always an advocate for employees. She worked tirelessly alongside the General Secretariat during the conference reorganization, assisting the staff at all levels through challenging workplace, career, and personal transitions. Under her leadership, the administrative offices have implemented numerous initiatives, increasing efficiency in the services they provide to both bishops and staff, while strengthening families and faith communities at home and around the globe through the national collections. I am sincerely grateful to Linda for these and her many other contributions. Her wisdom and institutional knowledge will be greatly missed, and in so many ways is irreplaceable. Linda, my brother bishops and I take this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for your distinguished service, your inspiration, and your friendship. Please be assured of our prayerful best wishes as you begin this new chapter in your life.
boy. Thank you all so much. This was unexpected, although I have to say a few minutes ago I noticed staff coming in, and I thought, they're coming in to hear Cardinal DiNardo's closing remarks. I am just grateful. I didn't ask for this opportunity, I was given it. There's so many people I could name today, and I'll forget people, but I want to say, first of all, thank you to two special men in this room. I think he's still in here. But Archbishop Dennis Schnurr appointed me as director of HR, so you can blame him. And then Monsignor Ronnie Jenkins, then General Secretary, invited me to join his team in the executive office. And this was something that was not on my radar. I just never would have imagined it. I'm a native Washingtonian. I grew up in that general area in Northeast Washington. I spent many days at the Basilica, so I was quite familiar with the neighborhood. The conference wasn't there at the time, of course, but I just never imagined this. This was not something that I planned for. So I am grateful that I've been given this opportunity. I work with so many talented staff who live out the gospel every day in the work that they do in supporting you all as shepherds, and I'm so grateful for them as well. I work with some great general secretaries and presidents of the conference. I'm doing my time there. I am just so grateful, and I think I joked with someone about wanting to have my Sister Thea moment. And I can't quite replicate her, but I would encourage all of you, I know you're doing it already, but I think Monsignor Jenkins looked around the conference and said, what voices are not at the table? I would encourage all of you to look around your chanceries and your parishes, just to say what voice is missing, who's missing around this table, who can I invite in to help me carry out my work. You have many talented people around in your dioceses, you know this already, and in your parishes, who have not been asked to come forward. They're willing to help. I think we all want to help you. And I know and I believe that you will make the right decision in responding to this crisis that is facing our church today. Thank you all again.
I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Teresa Ritterhoff, who was appointed by Monsignor Bransfield to succeed Linda in the position of Associate General Secretary. She was announced on September the 10th. Teresa joined the conference in 2011 and currently serves as the Executive Director of the Office of Human Resources. Please join me in offering Teresa congratulations on the appointment and our prayerful support as she takes on these new important responsibilities. Thank you, Teresa. One of the bishops asked me, when we're dealing with all these matters of what do we do until all these matters come true in our proposals about how do you report bishops. It's very easy to report bishop who's not doing his job. Report it to the nunciature, friends. Tell everyone that. You report it to the nunciature. They're always willing to take that. Also, Jonathan Raya has been receiving a whole number of all of our comments, resource aspects, and he's got them, and he's willing to take all kinds of things more. And that will be part of what we do, particularly in the task force dealing with these matters. So please give them to Jonathan. Brothers, I opened the meeting on Monday expressing some disappointment, and I end the meeting with hope. My hope is first of all grounded in Christ, who desires that the church be purified right now and that our efforts bear fruit. In late summer, on your behalf, I expressed our renewed fraternal affection for our Holy Father. In September, the Administrative Committee expressed for all of us our love, obedience, and loyalty for Pope Francis. Now, together with you today, gathered in Baltimore in plenary assembly, we, the members of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, pledge to His Holiness our loyalty and devotion in these difficult days. I am sure that under the leadership of Pope Francis, the conversation that the global church will have in February will help us to eradicate the evil of sexual abuse from our church. It will make our local efforts more global, and the global perspective will help us here. Brothers, you and the speakers we have heard from have given me direction and consensus. I will take it as a springboard for action. Listening is essential, but listening must inform decisive action. Let me take this moment to thank the many survivors and experts who have given us such good counsel and direction in these last few days. When the summer's news first broke, we committed to 3 goals: to do what we could to get to the bottom of Archbishop McCarrick's situation, to make reporting of abuse and misconduct by bishops easier, and to develop a means of holding ourselves accountable that was genuinely independent, duly authorized, and had substantial lay involvement. Now, we are on course to accomplish these goals. That is the direction that you and the survivors of abuse across our country have given me for the February meeting in Rome. More than that, in the days prior to the meeting of Episcopal Conference presidents in February, the task force I have established this week will convert that direction into some specific action steps. Some of those action steps include a process for investigating complaints against bishops reported through a third-party compliance hotline. We will complete a proposal for a single national lay commission and a second proposal for a national network relying upon the established diocesan review boards with their lay expertise to be overseen by the metropolitan or senior suffragan. In other words, what's emerged in the last couple days is that both proposals have their proponents, and we're going to work on both and make them as crisp as we can. Also, we'll work on finalizing the standards of accountability for bishops, finalizing the protocol for removed bishops, and studying national guidelines for the publication of lists of names of those clerics facing substantiated claims of abuse. Supporting the fair and timely completion of the various investigations into the situation surrounding Archbishop McCarrick and publication of their results. We are grateful for the Holy See's statement of October 6th in this regard and consider it close to us as the workings out of the Holy See on this matter. We therefore leave this place committed to take the strongest possible action at the earliest possible moment that we can. We will do so in communion with the Universal Church. Moving forward in concert with the church around the world will make the church in the U.S. stronger and will make the global church stronger. But our hope for true and deep reform ultimately lies in more than excellent systems, as essential as these are. It requires holiness, the deeply held conviction of the truth of the gospel, and the eager readiness to be transformed by those truths in all the aspects of our lives. As the Apostolic Nuncio reminded us yesterday, if the church is to reform herself and her structures, then the reform must spring from her mission, the mission of making known Christ, the Son of the living God. No system of governance or oversight, however excellent and necessary, suffices alone to make us, weak as we all are, able to live up to the high calling we have received in Christ. We must thus, as bishops, recommit to holiness and the mission of the church. Brothers, I have heard you today and yesterday and the day before. I am confident that in unity with the Holy Father and in conversation with the Universal Church in February, we will move forward decisively. There is much more to be done, but what we have done is a sign of hope for me, not disappointment. Commending everything to the intercession of Our Lady, then let us say together, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. I'm sorry? There's some announcements from Monsignor Bransfield.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, I take this opportunity to provide you the information concerning the January 2nd to January 8th, 2019 retreat to take place at Mundelein Seminary. Father Raniero Cantalamessa, preacher to the papal household, will graciously serve as the retreat director. Father Cantalamessa has selected as the theme for the retreat from St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 3, verse 14, he appointed 12 to be with him and to send them out to preach. The mission of the apostles and of their successors. Father Cantalamessa will deliver 2 daily meditations, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The program of the retreat will begin at 4 p.m. Central Time on January the 2nd to allow bishops to arrive earlier in the day that day on January 2nd. The program will conclude by 10 a.m. on January 8th, which will allow the rest of the day for return travel. Mundelein Seminary will be able to offer some rooms for bishops who arrive on January 1st or for those who are departing after the 8th. The USCCB plans to have a registration site created by the end of this week for bishops to register. Arrival and departure information, including special considerations needed for travel before January 2nd or after the 8th, will be collected through this portal. Once the site is available, it will be posted to the Bishops Only website later this week. As well, modification documents will be, the final documents, having received the modifications, that is, will be available on the Bishops Only website for the standards, for the special commission, and for the protocols once the respective committees integrate those into the documents. And finally, the schedule of dates for the June 2019 meeting is Tuesday, June 11th to Friday, June 14th. Tuesday, June 11th to Friday, June 14th, 2019 here in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you, Your Eminence.
That concludes this public portion of our meeting. Before inviting Archbishop Gomez to pray, I would like to thank our observers, our guests, our media representatives for being with us. And most of all, brothers, I want to thank you. It's been a little grueling, but very interesting and certainly productive. So thank you all. And Archbishop Gomez, how about a final prayer? Whatever. Yeah, that's great. Glory be is always fine. That's always a good prayer.
Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall, world without end. Amen.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom.
Pray for us.
Executive session will continue tomorrow, Thursday, November 15th, 9 o'clock in this room. Thank you.
All right. Hello.
We made it.